Thank you very much. I'm Jim Kakalios, a physics professor at the University of Minnesota. And the author of The Physics of Superheroes. I want to tell you a little bit about the uncanny physics of superheroes. First, a little introduction. How did a mild-mannered physics professor become associated with Superman and Spider-Man? In my day job, I'm a condensed matter experimentalist, which means that I work in a laboratory. Condensed matter is a fancy way of saying solid-state physics. Done a lot of work on amorphous semiconductors. These are materials you see in solar cells or in flat panel displays. 1/F noise, which Will Wheaton has expertly explained. I did work for about 10 years in granular media, or sand piles. We call it granular media when we're talking to the funding agencies. Most recently, I've done work on neuroscience, using techniques we developed to study noise in amorphous semiconductors and applying them to the brain. But that's not why I'm here. Oh, by the way, I should stress the important thing is that I've done this for over 20 years because in university, if you've been working for 20 years, they give you a pipe. And if there's one thing I've learned from reading comic books, you're not a scientist unless you have a pipe. All these years of graduate school, it turned into a prop comic. Anyway. I'm here because back in 2001, I created a class at the University of Minnesota that was called Everything That I Learned About Science, Everything I Know About Science, I Learned from Reading Comic Books. This is a real physics class that covers everything from Isaac Newton to the transistor, but there's not an inclined plane or pulley in sight. All the examples come from superhero comic books, and as much as possible, those cases where the superheroes get their science right. You know, I actually had this issue of Action Comics as a kid, where Superman visits a college campus. I was fascinated in what life in college was going to be like. I realized that there were some parts that weren't too realistic here, but still there are some features on the cover that you could see that are indeed accurate, namely, all professors at all times always wear caps and gowns. And all professors are 800-year-old white men. But I wound up actually, the path that led me to being here tonight came from that class, and on May 2nd, 2002, inspired by that class, I wrote an op-ed for the Minneapolis Star-Tribune about how a key scene in Spider-Man turned out to be a textbook illustration of forces in motion. And they published this on the day that the first Spider-Man movie opened. The university, I thought, well, with Spider-Man, you know, coming out in the movie theaters, this might be a good opportunity to get some science into the newspaper. The university put out a little press release saying, well, Spider-Man's on the big screen, but if you want to know about the science of superheroes, the person to ask is Professor Jim Kakalios, teaches this freshman seminar, blah, blah, blah. I should note that they have put out press releases about me before. About my work on 1/F noise, semiconductors. Result? 0. You write one story about Spider-Man, however, and the press release came out on a Friday. By Monday, I was getting calls from CNN Headline News, the BBC, the London Times. The Associated Press came to my office, where I just happened to have these lecture demonstration tools in there. Lucky break. At this stage in my life, I reconciled myself to the fact that I could win 3 Nobel Prizes, and I know what photo they're using in my obituary. I say this to my colleagues. They say, win 3 Nobel Prizes, how? Like in a trap game? This article actually went around the nation. This is actually a clipping from the Chicago Sun-Times. It actually went around the world. where I think I know what they're saying about me. And then I started showing up in places that physics professors don't usually appear. For example, and this is a perfect audience for this, if you're ever playing Trivial Pursuit and you're playing Volume 6 and you get card 291, I'll tell you right now, the question, the science question, the answer is kryptons. The question is, what planet's gravity did science professor Jim Kakalios estimate? Now, I didn't even know this was happening. A student brought this to my attention. I borrowed the card and I went downstairs to my department chairman and I showed it to him and I said, Alan, who's the most famous scientist you know? And he looked at me and he looked at the card and he said, Stephen Hawking. He's not a genius. Oh, well then it's you. But comic books actually can get their science right more often than you think. Here's a scene from an old World's Finest featuring team-ups of Batman and Robin and Superman. And here's Victor Danny, a crook who's become super intelligent through a means that I'll mention in a moment. And he wants to find out where the Batcave is. And his henchman protests that nobody's ever found out where the Batcave is. And Danny says, that's because nobody with my mental power ever tried. Listen, I want you to bury sticks of dynamite in deep rock outside Gotham City and then set them off. You mean the shockwaves from the explosions can show where the Batcave is? Yes, wherever there's a cave, the wave travels at different speeds. And then it'll show up like a big cave like the Batcave on my radar seismograph. Well, this is correct. Sound waves, pressure waves do travel at different velocities depending on the density of the material. In the old westerns, the tracker wants to know where the train is coming. He puts his ear to the metal rail, because the sound waves travel faster through the steel than they do through the air. And in fact, geologists use this as a technique for searching for underground pockets of natural gas or petroleum. So here's some accurate science in a comic book. Sometimes they get how science is done very wrong. Here's earlier in the story, John Carr, another scientist, is making a presentation at a science conference, and he's developed a brain amplifier that could increase any man's mental power 100 times. But there's one ingredient that's still missing, and I haven't found out yet what it is. Now, I can empathize, because I've invented a device that will turn lead into gold and tap water into gasoline. But it's missing one key ingredient, and as soon as I know what it is, I'm off to the races. And I like this part over here. Here's Victor Danny thinking, if I had that invention and could find the missing ingredient, it could make me super intelligent. Then I'd be able to loot the world. And I tell my students, this is what you need in life. Confidence. I love this part up here on top. One uninvited guest is present, Victor Danny, crooked ex-scientist. Because it doesn't matter how many advanced degrees you have. Once you're crooked, you're out of the club. They just rip the electrolytes off the lab coat and put it on.